Hey everyone, Joel here with Dissecting DIY, and today I wanted to go over how do you deal with epoxy. Well, very recently you probably saw my thin line flag, which encompasses more than just a few of the line flags that are out there, blue, green, and red for police, military, and the fire department, but it now encompasses dispatchers. There's a pink line flag for breast cancer awareness. There's all sorts of colors coming out. And of course, white is EMS, doctors, and nursing. So, if you're thinking about building these and want to find a way to honor each without having to have, you know, 10 different flags hanging on your wall, I think this is a great way, especially for things like I'm military. So I usually run the green line, but I used to dispatch, and it was a while ago before gold was the color, which is why you probably see I have a blue line flag. I was a police dispatcher, and I just never updated it since then. But it's a good way to honor the police. So, what are some of the ways that you can do an epoxy project with having the minimal amount of issue with the epoxy? Well, there's a couple of things you need to know, and so long as you follow those directions, you'll be fine. It's not that scary, and I'll explain why. There are a couple different epoxies. Most epoxies you can pour from 1/8 to 1/4 inch. You just got to find out what the best one is. This one here is up to 1/4 inch. The deeper you go with the pour, the hotter it's going to get, and it can sometimes mess up the project by pulling away or just there being too much heat. You really just want to watch those instructions, but no more than 1/4 inch. You should be fine. This is a 2-to-1 ratio mix, and that epoxy is going to go a little bit slower in its cure. And what will actually end up happening with this is you can go up to 2 to 4 inches because of that slower cure time. The problem is this takes about an hour to gel. This takes about 24 hours to gel, and it will take a maximum of 72 hours or greater just to get to the hardness that you want. Now, over the next month with this stuff, it'll finally reach the hardness that it's going to reach. But it takes about 30 full days as opposed to something like this, which tends to be a little bit less. Usually over 30 days is when that's it, how long it really takes for it to reach the hardness that it will throughout the life of the project. But so long as you stick to the ratios, you won't have any issues. A lot of people think if they add a little bit more hardener or a little bit more resin, it can affect the reaction time, or it can affect the heat levels that they'll be experiencing. This is wrong. The chemical process, the way that these are designed is they need that exact ratio, and adding more or less can totally knock that ratio out of alignment with how it cures, and then you got a project that won't harden, stays either jelly or it starts to foam, and typically with too much hardness, it starts to foam, or it'll not cure properly. So just be careful, because you really don't want to rot out the project. I actually had to rot out this project just because I didn't use the right amount of color. So you're going to want to do a seal coat, typically with a resin that gels pretty quickly. So this one here, I did try using a seal coat with this stuff, but because it took a full day, it all just sunk to the bottom, and it really didn't help with that project. But the reason you do seal coats is usually to minimize bubbles. Bubbles can be a huge problem with epoxy and really make a project look terrible. And all you have to do to get rid of most of them most of the time is just torch it, and it'll be fine. But as the project, especially a slow curing project, on an unsealed surface, there's pores in that wood, and there can be air in there, and those bubbles can leak out into the project and really destroy it, especially if you're not paying attention to it in that very, very critical moment of constantly torching it to get those bubbles out. And just sealing, doing a seal coat typically helps that. So once that's all done and you followed your hardener ratios, next is timing. A lot of companies, or they'll say, oh, you can do a minimum of 1:30 seconds, 3 minutes. I always recommend a 5-minute minimum. I recommend they have these paddles that you can buy just for epoxy that you put on your drill. You just want to go slow and just stay consistent. When you mix the two together, you'll see kind of like this pearl glass type look to the epoxy. And if you just watch that as you mix, you'll see that it'll get clearer and clearer and clearer. And that's how you know that your epoxy is working the way you want it to work, or that it's starting to mix correctly. Then you just pour it into another container, mix it one last time, put your dyes in. Dyes, if you're going to light the back, I recommend, so this will say something, it has a warning on it that says no more than 1 drop can be enough. If you're going to light your project, 1 drop is definitely not enough. 3 drops is good, but in about 12 to 15 ounces of epoxy at a 1/4 inch depth, I would recommend about 4 to 5 drops. I would test that in cups and then put lights under those cups once they've cured to see what kind of diffusion you're getting. That being said, that's just with dye. Of course, you put the dye in and you want to mix it for another 1.5 to 2 minutes with the dye in it so it gets in there. And then I think that the only other thing that you're really going to have to focus on, so we've covered that. I think we covered temps. So the temps, again, 60. So with your temperatures, it's just going to be the 60 to 80 degrees. 60 is the minimum you can go, and anything under 70 will start to slow the cure time. Once that slowing occurs, it is best, or if you know that slowing is going to occur because you can't keep the temps up, you just really want to heat your epoxy by putting them in warm water and getting them up to 70 to 80 degrees. The warmer, the better. As long as it's within that 70 to 80 degrees. But anyways, that's how you deal with epoxy. I hope that, in the future you feel that you can do these epoxy projects. They are low VOC, but always wear a mask because you will see, especially with the warm epoxy, some type of vapors coming up. I would just wear a mask as a precaution. But other than that, because of low VOCs, it really kind of increases where you can get these projects done, which is great. So I'm Joel at Dissecting DIY. I hope this helps for your next epoxy project. And if you've been avoiding a project because you're afraid, I hope this shows that you can do it. Just know there is going to be a learning curve. It can be frustrating, but just be patient and understand that you can fix it, and you can always, it's going to take a little bit of extra time, especially with epoxy, with a 72-hour cure time. Just be patient, take your time, and you'll be fine. Follow the instructions, the mix ratios, and you'll be fine. I'm Joel at Dissecting DIY. You have a great day.